In this video I'm going to tie a slightly modified version of the Pumpkinhead, a fly that was originated by John Kent at Tunqua Lake a few years ago. This fly uses a 2x long straight shank hook. I think John used a curved hook with a silver lined orange glass bead. Your typical seed bead size bead is fine. Uses olive marabou for the tail and olive thread. And we'll just start the thread behind the bead, and then we just cover the hook shank with thread just to make it a little easier to have the materials well bound to the hook shank. This is 6/0 thread that I'm using on this fly. Helps to use a little bit thinner thread in order to keep the profile relatively slim and not get any bulk anywhere. Here's some olive marabou. I'm just going to tear some off of the quill, and then we're going to bind that torn part onto the hook shank. I like to measure the marabou first and then cut it to length before I bind it in. It saves me a step of cutting it once it's on the hook, and especially trying to cut behind the bead can be a little bit tricky. So I'll just cut it right in front of my fingers and then bind it on using a soft loop, and then bind it down the shank, holding the marabou up slightly so it stays up on top of the shank. Bring the thread back up to the bead, pick up any fluff that's sticking out that you don't like the looks of. Now I'm going to tie a piece of fine copper wire in. This is the modification I made on John's pattern. This is going to be a reinforcement for the hackle. So I'm going to double body here using some Stillwater Solutions Light Olive Sparkle Blend dubbing. It is a nice dubbing that adds a bit of translucency and flash to the body. You can use seal or even marabou. Some people, that's all they use, is just continue on with the marabou up the body to make a marabou body, but this stuff looks nice and adds a little bit of flash. So I'm going to dub a relatively sparse body, not too thick. Dub it forward right to the bead. And once I get to the bead, I'll be preparing the orange dyed grizzly hackle. This hackle is dyed with Kool-Aid, believe it or not. It's just a plain old grizzly saddle hackle, dyed with a package of unsweetened Kool-Aid. And I strip the barbs off of one side of the feather. I'm going to tie it in so it's the curve is curving towards the back, so I'm stripping it off the left hand side as you look down on top of the well marked side of the feather. Tie it in just behind the bead. Take a turn right behind the bead, and then wrap in open turns back to the bend, just where the tail starts. Dubbing the fly helps the hackle stand up nice and proud, and as I said before, it gives a little bit of extra flash to the fly as well. Once I get to where the wire is, I'm going to switch hands, bind down the hackle with a turn of wire. Once I've done that, I can let go of the hackle with my left hand. Then I'm going to wrap forward in open turns and wiggling the wire as I come forward so that the hackle fibers aren't bound down or mashed down. And I'll come forward with about the same number of turns as wire as I went backwards with hackle, and by wrapping in the same direction I end up crisscrossing the hackle all the way up. Makes for a very durable fly. The wire adds a touch of flash as well. And once I get up to the bead, I'll bind down the wire with a couple of turns of thread. Then fold the wire back and bind it again to lock it into place. Break it off by wiggling the end of my thumbnail, and then do a quick whip finish. Cut the thread, then I'll cut off the excess hackle. being careful not to cut any of the tail or cut the wire by accident. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just tear the tail to length. You want it to be about shank length. Makes for a nice clean tail. And I don't show it here, but I'd be putting a little bit of head cement on. And that is the Pumpkinhead, originated by John Kent and slightly modified by me.